Happy National Kidney Month, and welcome to the live episode of the Slave Food Conversation, where two African American physicians explore the role of racism as a unique form of stress and the weaponization of food in the creation of health disparities in the African American communities, irrespective of income. They discover eating a whole food, plant-based diet in urban communities is possible and is the key to eliminating health disparities. Dr. Columbus Batiste is an interventional cardiologist in Southern California. Dr. Batiste is a passionate, double board certified interventional cardiologist who has incorporated the power of a whole food, plant-based diet combined with exercise and stress reduction in his management of patients. Dr. Eric Walsh serves as medical director for urgent care services. Dr. Walsh has a double doctorate in medicine and public health. Dr. Walsh is passionate about educating people on ways to improve their mental, physical, and spiritual health. As a result, he's taken his God-given talents across the world and has given lectures and sermons on every continent. Today, Dr. Walsh and Dr. Batiste will be joined by our special guest, Dr. Hashmi. Dr. Hashmi, is a triple board certified physician who is an internalist, nephrologist, and obesity specialist. Dr. Hashmi is also the founder of the Self Principle, a 501c3 nonprofit whose goal is to provide evidence-based health, nutrition, and wellness research to the public. This week's episode will discuss how to prevent and protect your kidneys from failing. Statistics show that 1 in 3 U.S. adults are at risk of developing kidney disease. National Kidney Month raises awareness for kidney disease. This episode touches on the more personal level as the doctors converse with one another about the dangers of kidney disease. Thanks again for joining and enjoy tonight's conversation.
Thanks, Danette. Dr. Hashmi, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you doing?
I'm well. So you and I know each other very well, and Eric is now having an opportunity to meet you and interact with you. Eric, how are you?
Good. I'm good. It's starting to finally thaw out up here in Connecticut. So feeling a lot better. But it's good to meet you, Dr. Hashmi, and we're really excited. This is a great topic, affects many in the African American community, Latino community. So this is relevant to a lot of the folk who we hope to reach with these programs.
You know, I think you guys are going to be very fascinated by this topic because this is one of those things where for both of you guys, you see people with chest pain and so forth, and they have symptoms. They have shortness of breath, they have chest pressure, the squeezing, the elephant, and so forth. But kidney disease, the scariest part of kidney disease is there are no symptoms. And so there are so many people who walk around with this stuff, they never even know they have it.
Wow. So tell, well, first I want to kind of tell you, and we'll probably touch on this shortly. Kidney disease it's very up close and personal to my family. So my wife, who you met, her dad passed away from kidney failure. And so one of the things that, as long as I've known him, he had a transplant and then suffered with it, and starting off, as many people, with high blood pressure. And so I think one of the things that's great for our audience who may be less familiar with this concept of kidney disease, which seems almost like a death sentence in a lot of instances, is what is kidney disease? Tell us, what is kidney disease?
That's a fascinating question in itself, because defining kidney disease is talking about what the kidneys do. So my little running joke, and because Columbus and I are friends, is God made one heart, but because the kidneys are so important, created two. The only joke I have, I've been using it since middle school, so it's got to be over 20 years old, and that's the only joke I have. Two functions, and people mistake this all the time. The first function is essentially to get rid of fluids. So that's just, you can say, I took in a bunch of water, I got to get it out. That's what the kidneys do. So even people who end up going on dialysis can still make urine. So a misnomer is, well, how can I have kidney disease when I still make urine? Because the second function of kidneys is to clean. So think of the kidneys like a washing machine. Their job is to clean. And you're born with about 1 million kidney cells, or what we call nephrons, in each kidney. And the only thing that happens is they die as you continue to age. But the thing about kidneys is, by the time your doctor first notices that you actually have an elevation in creatinine. Now, creatinine is how we measure your kidney function, and we'll talk about it in a second. But by the time your doctor actually measures it, you have lost more than 40% of your kidney function already. So those cells have already died. But the reason the blood tests are not showing it is because of the fact that what's left over is working harder to compensate. So think of it in this terms. If you donate a kidney to your loved one or anybody, and you do that, you can have a fully functional, healthy life, because that kidney that's left over will do everything of the other kidney. That's how remarkable this body is. And that's how remarkable our ability to heal ourselves internally is.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And I haven't used that terminology or that thought process when I'm explaining things to patients. I use, much more simply when I reflect on the creatinine. I always joke with patients, and I'll tell them if they invite me to their home and they're going to give me a glass of iced tea, and they don't have any tea bags. So they put that old-fashioned cheesecloth on top of it, and then they put tea leaves on top and pour the water. I said, you can measure how effective that filter is by how many tea leaves are inside the glass. The more tea leaves you see in the glass, it lets you know how porous or how inefficient that filter is. And as we measure it as a rough estimate, that's a very poor man's analogy on the rise in creatinine that we may see, and some other factors that may be reflective of damage that's occurred.
That's a really good analogy. I already took one analogy. I'm using it already. In fact, last just did, I cited you in it, and we had talked about the 30-minute wait. I was like, well, Columbus Batiste said wait 30 minutes. It's an interesting analogy. I'll tell you.
I didn't say that. That was our guest, Dr. Chidi. Now he's another fashionably bald-headed guy here, so he would fit well in our club.
It's a very exclusive club, indeed. Yes. So the thing that most people don't understand about kidney function is we do not know how to measure kidney function directly in the clinic setting. And this is incredibly, incredibly important. So for example, you may have somebody who comes to your clinic and they have a kidney function that's elevated. So let's say they have stage 4. There are 5 stages to kidney disease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in stage number 5, it's considered to have a kidney function less than 15%. I'm simplifying it very simply. But if you get down to about 10 or less, you're at dialysis. So if you get somebody in your clinic, let's say they have a kidney function of 15%, they lose a bunch of weight. And now you check their kidney function again, and it's like 25%. I'll ask you a very complicated question, which is, did their kidney function actually improve? So this is where it's really important to understand. It doesn't. When you have scarring inside the kidneys, it doesn't get better. But the way we measure kidney function is through creatinine. Creatinine comes from your muscles. I'm pointing at my gun, so please, I would appreciate any compliments.
Weapons of destruction there. Come on now.
Thank you. Checks in the mail. But as you measure that creatinine from muscle, if you lose muscle with weight loss, it will seem like your kidney function is better when it isn't. So the ultimate question is then how do you know if your kidneys are getting better or not? One of the ways to measure is through looking at how much protein they spill in the urine. So think of the kidneys as a barrier. As you damage that barrier, it becomes leaky and leaky and leaky, and there are holes through which the protein spills. And if you talk about protein spilling and you say, what is the best type of protein you should eat to reduce protein for spilling? This is not my opinion. This is evidence-based in randomized control studies. It's plant-based proteins. We put every one of our patients on plant-based proteins because of the fact that it lowers the acidity in the blood, it lowers the pressure on the kidneys, and it lowers the protein they spill.
Wow. That right there that's deep. That's deep. Eric, were you going to chime in before
he said something earlier, Dr. Hashmi, that I wanted to pick up on. So you're talking about the loss of nephrons.
Yes.
as we age. Does this, what you just mentioned about plant-based proteins, does this in any way correlate with an ability to protect the nephrons?
Yeah, so what the data shows is there's something called bicarb. And for the folks listening to this show who don't know all of the science, bicarb is just a way, it's a poor man's version of trying to measure how much acid and how much base we have in the blood. So the higher the bicarb level, the more base we have. Physiologically, we need to have this certain pH in the body for all of our cells to function well. Now, what the data shows is that as your bicarb level goes down, specifically below 22, as it goes down below 22, your risk of dying increases and your risk of ending up on dialysis increases. So in the old-fashioned ways of treating bicarb, we used to give people sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, right? The problem with baking soda is you have most of our patients are also most of Columbus's patients. So those patients already usually have heart disease, and you're loading them up with the sodium portion of the bicarbonate. But what that studies show, and there are randomized studies that have done this, comparing a whole foods plant-based diet, which is the majority of it is fruits and vegetables, which are alkaline. There's no such thing as an alkaline diet. But if you like cornered me and said, you have to tell me there's alkaline diet, that's a plant-based diet. So you can use a whole foods plant-based diet to raise your bicarbonate level and protect your kidneys from getting worse. We're all going to die, right? So people talk about how not to die. I say it's not about you dying. You're all going to die. It's how we live and our impact on the world. But with nephrons, once you're born, you start losing a little bit of kidney function every single year. How much? It's about 0.5% every year on average. With people who have significant kidney disease, that number can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% every year. But in general, we lose 0.5%. So at 0.5%, you're going to live a full life to 120, right? Because I've heard that people who have bald heads live longer. You're 120 and still have your kidneys functioning when you die.
Wow.
The idea is to slow it down. You cannot say you're going to stop the decline because all of our cells are aging. It's just a fact of it.
All right. So what I need is I need to take a step back for some of our non-medical professionals out there, our listeners out there. And so tell us what's put you at risk? I mean, are we all, so if we're all destined to have kidney disease or lose our nephrons, does that mean we're all destined to have kidney disease? And apart from aging, what puts us at risk? What increases our risk for kidney disease?
Excellent question. And I'll tailor it a little bit even more. So first is one, nobody's destined to anything. You know, genetics only accounts for 20 to 30% of all diseases. After that, it's environment, it's what goes in your mouth. So that's a whole 70 to 80%. So in other words, you could be born in the poorest neighborhood and you can be successful in life, or you can be born in the richest and not make it. What puts you at risk when it comes to kidney disease is three things. And those three things, one of them accounts for literally all of the risk factors when it comes to kidney disease. So those three things are, first one is obesity. The more you weigh, and here's what's fascinating. When I used to be a fellow at a certain medical school and then at a certain place, most of the patients I was seeing, because of the area I was in, they were bodybuilders. And so I was very big into working out and fitness and martial arts. So I had all of these people would come to me.
Hence the big guns, right?
There were no big guns. The leaner you were, the better you were. But what happened was all of these guys would come and they were afraid to go talk to their own doctors because they were developing kidney disease. Now, every one of them was injecting steroids. These were big bodybuilder types. And, you know, the question they would always ask me is why am I getting kidney disease? And the answer was not because they were injecting the steroids. The steroids were messing up their livers. They get all sorts of cancers inside their livers. They get heart failure from it, different issue. But the reason was your kidneys can only handle a certain amount of weight. It doesn't matter if you're pure fat or pure muscle. So you take a 300-pound linebacker, and let's say he has a body or she has a body fat, doesn't matter, we're equal opportunity. He has a body fat less than 10%, right? So it's all muscle. Are they going to develop kidney disease? Absolutely. They're going to get secondary focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. So weight is absolute. There's no such thing as a healthy weight when it comes to kidneys. It does not exist. Weight puts pressure on the kidneys. What's the worst type of weight? It's the belly weight. It causes mechanical pressure on the kidneys, makes the kidneys work twice as hard. The medical term is hyperfiltration. But for folks, just remember, you put pressure mechanically onto the kidney. So that's obesity, number one. Number two is high blood pressure. What's the problem with high blood pressure? Most people who have it don't know they have it. Who's the highest risk for having high blood pressure? Is the African American community. So what happens to a lot of my patients, they walk into my clinic, they haven't seen a doctor, and their blood pressure is 190, 200. And for those people listening, a normal blood pressure is around 120s, right? But you're looking at somebody walking around with 190, 200. Now, they've adapted to that. But what they've done with that adaptation is they've made all of their blood vessels like lead pipes, really, really hard. So one of the things that people don't understand is when they come and talk to Dr. Batiste and they said, Dr. Batiste goes in and does Roto-Rooter, right, cleans up the vessels. What they forget is heart disease is not heart disease. Heart disease is plaques all over your body, including the kidney, and nobody thinks of it that way. So when I tell them that because you have heart disease, you have kidney disease. And they look at me like, well, nobody told me that. But it's because we focus on small things. We don't look at the whole body or the whole person. So high blood pressure makes everything rigid and inflexible, and it decreases the blood supply. And what the kidney does, which is really fascinating and doesn't make any sense to me, is when the kidney senses that it's getting less blood, it turns on the RAS pathway, which is a fancy way of saying it basically reduces the blood to the kidneys even further. So check this out. The reason this mechanism exists is the kidney says, I will sacrifice myself. Dr. Batiste, I, the nephron, will sacrifice myself for you, the heart, because the heart and the brain have to stay alive. So the kidney has this mechanism that it figures it might be bleeding somewhere. So it turns on this pathway to literally shut itself down. And it's a fascinating phenomenon. So we covered obesity, we covered high blood pressure, but the one that's the biggest one when it comes to kidney disease is diabetes, diabetes, diabetes. Diabetes is the king and queen of kidney disease. It is the highest thing that is going to put you at risk. And when we talk about dialysis, the reason I wanted to discuss this with you guys is because if you look at who is the highest risk for going on dialysis, African Americans have a 4 times higher risk of ending on dialysis than Caucasians do. All the other groups, you can look at Native Americans, 1.4%, Asians, 1.4%, African Americans, 3.7%. And part of that is not just diabetes, it's also the high blood pressure, and it's the fact that we talk about social determinants of health and how much we have done to make sure that access to food that's healthy, we make it further. Access to food that's highly processed, that's loaded with carbs, that are basically the processed kinds and high in fat, is so readily available and fulfilling that there's this concept of food addiction. And the people who are addicted to food are usually the ones who come from lower socioeconomic status. How do I know? Because I come from it.
That's what I was going to ask you, Dr. Hash. How do you know this as a successful nephrologist? I mean, you probably came from like a highly affluent area and parents who were successful and all this other stuff like that. How can you speak about food deserts and addiction and things like that?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? So people have maps about everybody, right? So don't let the shiny head fool you. So I was born in Pakistan, and we lived in a small village where we didn't have running water. We had a drum where we drank out of, we took showers out of. The water came for 2 hours each day. My father, he actually came to America. He was essentially self-taught. He didn't go to college because he couldn't afford it. He taught himself college. He got a scholarship to come to UCLA. He studied Islamic studies over there, and that's how he came here. We came here, and I grew up in Gardena, and I went to school in Compton. And I remember, the first school that I went to before I went to Compton was Lusinger High School, and we had a few drive-bys, and one of my acquaintances, I wouldn't even call a friend, but just an acquaintances, was shot, and he died. And then we actually had an incident where we had 4 different high schools essentially converge on ours, where people were standing on the streets and shooting each other. And I remember when I would take our school bus over to Compton, the issues that you would see over there, you would see guys in drive-bys, and then you would hear about the drive-by the next night on the news. And you would literally see the car driving by, and you would see the people with the guns in it. We had a meth house across the street from our house in Gardena. I came home, we couldn't get in because there were choppers everywhere and everything was quarantined. And I grew up in that. And I grew up on fast food. I mean, every bad thing that you can imagine, mine was McDonald's, it was Taco Bell. My parents were dirt poor when they were here. My father had some little money that he was getting from UCLA at the time, and he used that for all of his children. And my father did everything he could. My brother stayed back, and my brother got involved in some really, really bad stuff. So my father ended up essentially going broke, trying to help my family out. So for me, poverty was a way of life. You know, I remember distinctly, my mother used to teach students our culture and so forth. And this family would come and they would always buy Taco Bell. And, you know, my sister and I, we would actually eat their leftovers. And it's not a pleasant memory, but I can tell you, you know, they figured it out, and then they would buy some extra tacos because they knew that we would wait till they were finished eating, and then they would leave, and we would eat what's left over. So I've been at a place where things are very, very hard, where we're hungry, and it was okay to be hungry. That's just how life was. And now I'm in a place where, you know, I'm so blessed. I have a beautiful home. I have a beautiful job.
Yes.
I haven't seen poverty, but those impressions is why I do what I do.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very
Amen.
powerful. Very
Yes.
powerful. And I have to say, thank you for sharing that, actually.
Yes.
Because that was very profound. And as a son of immigrants myself from Jamaica, so we might actually know some cricket people together. I would say that was actually very profound, and it does lend to the fact that you understand very well the experiences we're speaking to in the Slave Food Project around Columbus introduced me to this term, food apartheid. Where almost intentionally neighborhoods are almost set up to have much less of a nutritional options and so forth. So thanks for sharing that. But Columbus is going to say something. Sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, listen, I think that it's profound. And I knew a touch of your story. I didn't know the complete breadth of it. As you know, I grew up in Compton. And I think one of the things, and I think it was one of these TED Talks mentioned, there's more, we suffer more from drive-throughs than we actually do from drive-bys, but drive-bys for growing up in that neighborhood are commonplace, right? And so one of the things that we're seeing is not only the explosion of fast food, but we also see your places. We see DaVitas all around, all throughout these inner cities. We see dialysis centers. We see them on the corners, and you may see 2 or 3 that are just there in close walking proximity because of these are crucibles of conflict, these crucibles of stress, crucibles of nutritional stress and poor nutritional substances. So that's powerful. I think that speaks, once again, I thank you for sharing that with the audience. That resonates to allow them to know you speak directly to them because you've lived it in the past. And I think we all have a why. Eric has a why from his background and so forth. I have a why from my background with my dad and my father-in-law, and these things come into play. And so when, we see people out there suffering, and it's all people, but right now I always kind of tell people, it's just like when I'm in the cath lab, the 2 of you may be waiting for an angiogram from me, but if someone comes in with a heart attack, my attention is diverted to them because I'm seeing that they're at greatest risk. And so when we're seeing this firestorm that's happening inside of communities of color in terms of chronic modifiable diseases, the work that you're doing is extremely important. So I'll shift gears here for just a second before we dive back into kidney disease and the fact of speak to us about the work that you're doing, because you're actually teaching the teachers. You're teaching the physicians. You're educating the providers really about the impact that of therapy, of therapeutic nutrition, nutritional therapy, applying it to patients and how that can change lives. So tell us a bit about your work and what and how you got involved with some of that, and on what scale. Tell us about the scale of the impact.
Yeah. So, what was interesting was my first sort of ask when I started my new job, which was straight out of fellowship. I was asked as part of the organization to get involved in obesity management. And, I knew a little bit about it. I had been a personal trainer for a while. So what I understood for
Wait,
nutrition,
you were a personal trainer too?
yes.
So
Man,
why,
so
so you do have guns?
yeah, this guy
No,
here.
there's nothing left. There's nothing left. It's all in the past.
That's
But,
all right.
what I knew from personal training was you put somebody on a low carb diet, they lose a bunch of weight, and you've done your job. You put them through all these workouts. So you could ask me about fitness, I could tell you everything. You could ask me about diet, and what I tell you is you're going to eat steak and broccoli every single day. And if you do that, you're going to look lean and you're going to be fantastic. That was the extent of my knowledge. And one of the things that really motivated me to learn about nutrition was when I met my wife has lupus, and we went through some very difficult time. I'm very, very blessed. We have two beautiful daughters. We were told we never would. Life is about finding out your why. And I found out my why when I saw her go through stuff. I wanted to know how to help her. And there isn't a day that goes by where my North Star isn't clear. So I wanted to learn about nutrition. And I had the opportunity to create programs for Southern California for the organization, which cares for 4.6 million members. And part of that, what they asked me was they said, okay, we have all of these guys with diverse opinions. We don't know which is the right way to go. So we're asking you to do it. So for 6 months, I went essentially inside Starbucks. I drank a ton of coffee. That's probably where I got addicted. But I read over 1,000 studies, and I created a PowerPoint to essentially say, this is the vision for Southern California. And since that time, I've constantly been refining. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to reach people in a manner that was simple for them to understand. So I created Self Principle. Reading thousands and thousands of studies, what taught me was that there were four concepts that continue to come up over and over. And every single place in the blue zones, every single place where people were living longer, they practiced four things. And they didn't even know they were practicing this. So this concept of self principle is not my original idea. People have been practicing this for thousands of years, but it's sleep. So what the data shows is these guys in these blue zones and in the areas living over 100 consistently, they sleep more than 7 hours. Moving, they don't have any gyms that are located there, so they were never affected by the pandemic shutting them down. What they do is they just move. On average, they end up moving anywhere between 5 to 10 miles a day without even knowing they're walking 5 to 10 miles a day. And for us, we keep telling people 30 minutes a day. I can tell
Yeah,
you 30 minutes a day is nothing,
that's
right?
right.
So these guys, they move. And when you look at these 100-year-olds and they're sharp and they look healthy and they look 30 years younger, there's a reason for it. But the L is for love. And what was fascinating about these folks was they practice very simple things. They practice gratitude. They practice kindness. They're the nicest people that you meet. They're the kind of people that you go talk to them and you feel like you've known them for 30 years when you've just met them. That's this concept of compassion and empathy and caring and doing mindfulness, meditation, all those things that seem a little hokey. They're not hokey. They're evidence-based in randomized studies where we've seen what an impact it does on things like your frontal lobe just to spend 1 or 2 minutes each day, whether you like prayer. So for me is every morning what I do is I have a hard time trying to sit for 10 minutes and meditating. I always go through my prayer of thanking for all the things, all the blessings I have every day. I count my blessings every day because I can tell you there was a time where I felt like I had none. And to be where I'm at and to get up every morning and have all that I haven't forgotten. And the last
Mm.
portion is food. The food portion or the F portion, all it is the data consistently says that you go plant focused. If you can't do 100%, there's nothing wrong with you. For me, being plant based is for several reasons. I believe that the planet that we live in, we have an obligation to our children. I got two daughters, and I want to make this place a little bit better. So I think And I believe, and the data shows, that a plant-based diet is the most effective way to help the environment, period. You can't argue otherwise. From a health perspective, brain, kidney, heart, pick an organ and you will find that a plant-focused diet is the ideal diet. If you can do plant-based completely, great. And if you can't, there's nothing wrong with you. I will welcome you with open arms. And I'm here to find what is similar between us than to pick on the little tiny details that separate us. There's way too much in this world on what we are different on. But there's so many things that we are similar on, and those similarities is what creates friendships and bonds, and what creates purpose in our lives, and that purpose is what helps us to live longer. That's it. That's literally self-principle.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Those we echo those principles and those keystone, many of them are which are keystone habits towards habit change. And what's interesting, as you brought up the concept of gratitude and empathy and love, and I love this research that I reflected on, which is just the fact they surveyed individuals who reported stress, and those who reported stress had an increase higher likelihood of mortality, of dying. But what they found was that those individuals who reported stress, but then yet did acts of service, who were more grateful, had lower burden of less likelihood of dying. And so it's obviously it's giving of yourself. It's doing the things that you're doing that extend beyond. So bravo to you, bravo to you. That's good. We love the self principle.
I wanted to go back to the last principle, food. I think the way you present that is very beautiful. And so, and tying this back to the kidney. So we obviously promote a whole food plant-based diet here. When it comes to the kidneys, if you could tell people things in the standard American diet to prioritize getting out of their diet to protect their kidneys, what foods, drinks, what would you say? Alcohol, cigarettes, throw it all in there.
Yeah, so absolutely alcohol is there. If you talk about alcohol, what's fascinating is alcohol directly damages the kidney. Okay, so this comes as a shock to people because people who are in the medical field know about hepatorenal syndrome, which is basically liver and kidney. So first, drinking too much damages the liver to a point where the liver can't regenerate. Once that happens, essentially it causes all of this fluid to start accumulating inside the belly. It's because there's a medical term, which is splanchnic vasodilation, yada, yada, yada. But essentially what happens is as the liver fails, it causes the kidneys to fail. That's the traditional way of thinking. But what the data shows is alcohol directly damages the kidney. And I hate to say this, there actually isn't a safe drinking limit. The largest study that was ever done that was looking at brain function, what they found was that it didn't matter how little you drank. Over a span of 20 to 30 years, your hippocampus atrophies more, and it's linear based on the amount you drink. So for alcohol, what we say is, look, if you're having a couple drinks a week, and when I say drinks, it's not drinks, right? It's just a couple glasses of wine a week, it's fine. The American standard on alcohol is the loosest standard in the world. UK recently reduced their guidelines. And remember, they're all looking at the same studies. So why is it that US has such a loose standards and the others don't? It's because of the fact that we have the strongest lobbying industry around the beer and spirits industry that comes in with a lot of cash. So it's hard to make those changes. So alcohol is definitely there. Red meat has been proven over and over again. In fact, if you look at the effects of red meat, if you're somebody who eats red meat regularly, we can predict the severity of your heart attack by measuring your trimethylamine N oxide levels or TMAO levels. So what ends up happening is you change the entire gut microbiome. And what we know is that that same gut microbiome creates all of these uremic toxins. So what they used to do in Japan, and they still do it, is they couldn't have enough dialysis machines for people. So what they would do is they would put them on these extremely low protein diets, and they would put them on these essentially resins to try to get the potassium out of their body. But what the data shows is if you put people on a plant-based diet, they actually produce less uremic toxins. Wow. So why the heck would you not just do that to help your colon so that it produces less so that you can avoid dialysis for longer? And when you talk about categories, here's how it works. I look at everything as food addiction. So if you want to know what are the foods to avoid, it's very simple. Anything that comes in processed version that's rich in refined carbohydrates and that's high in fat. We're not talking about foods in their natural state like nuts. We're not talking about avocados. We're talking about processing. So take pizza, which is high in fat because it's processed. We're not talking about nuts. So foods in their natural state, fat or not fat, they're really healthy for you. You start to process and mess with Mother Nature. We are not as smart as Mother Nature. Heck, I'm not even as smart as my kids. So all of those things are important when we think about the basics. If you start and always keep that in your mind, it's high fat and it's refined carbohydrates. If I get rid of that and I focus on foods in their natural state, there's a difference between natural state and saying become a raw vegan. No, I'm not saying that at all. Natural state basically means is you're not processing. You're not adding all sorts of chemicals that you can't even smell or spell or pronounce or anything like that. As natural as it gets. That's what you're aiming for.
And the other, I just want to throw in one more thing because a lot of people have asked me over the years about soda and drinking soda, and Americans drink a lot of soda. What impact does drinking colas and sodas have on the kidneys?
So two things, right? So first one is the sugar. So then people say, well, that's okay because I drink diet sodas. What's the problem with that? So focusing on sugars and then artificial sweeteners is really important. What the data shows is that if you drink artificial sweeteners, you're more likely to become overweight or obese than if you were actually drinking the darn sugar itself. And the reason for it is think about addiction. And I keep coming to this because food addiction is real. It is not classified in the DSM-4. It is not classified in the DSM-5 as an actual disorder. But food addiction is very real, and it is the root of so much of the stuff that we face. So when you talk about sugar, artificial sweeteners are 200 to 26,000 times sweeter than sugar. Just think about that. So if you ask a heroin addict and you say, why is it that you keep injecting? Well, I'm seeking that very first high I ever had. So if you give somebody something that's so sweet, what ends up happening is nothing else ever comes close. Strawberries are not sweet. Apples are not sweet. And that's why the people who drink artificial sweeteners, I don't care what it is, you take your coffee and you put artificial sweeteners, you are setting yourself up for disaster. It doesn't matter if it's the green packet, the yellow packet, the pink packet, the purple packet, does not matter. If it's sweeter than sugar, you're going to go ahead and downregulate your receptors for the reward pathway. So you're going to crave more of that to get the same sensation. So that's the first part of it. That's sugars are bad. We know that. Then there's the artificial sweeteners, which in my opinion are bad and probably even worse because it gives you a false sense of security. This is kind of like when statins came out first. People were like, let me go have that triple cheeseburger because I took a statin.
Yes.
Same concept here, right? So that's the first portion. The second portion is phosphorus. We know that phosphorus is linked. I can't say it's causality. What I'm saying is it's strongly linked to mortality. The more phosphorus you put in your body, the higher your risk of dying. Now, here's the thing about sodas. Sodas are one of the fastest ways to get the phosphorus inside your body. So what is the difference between phosphorus in plants and phosphorus in animal foods or in artificial or sodas or etc.? When you think about those two things, what you have to understand is let's say that you're looking at a couple of items. I don't know, we'll say peanuts and we'll say cheese. And let's assume that we have the serving size so that they have exactly the same amount of phosphorus. And you ask the question based on phosphorus, which one should you have for your kidney health and for your heart and brain health? And the answer is always the plant-based food. If it's peanuts, whatever it is, because the phosphorus has 50% less absorption from plant-based sources than it does for animal-based sources. That's why. This is why when you look at the Journal of Renal Nutrition and you look at these folks talking about it, plant-based foods, even if they have phosphorus, they have half the amount of absorption that occurs. Now, is phosphorus all bad? Of course not, right? You need phosphorus for things like ATP. If you want to breathe, you got to have phosphorus in there to generate ATP.
Yes.
But too much, and especially when you can't get rid of it, it's got nowhere to go. It precipitates inside your blood vessels, turns them into lead pipes. And that's the problem.
Wow, excellent information.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, it doesn't, it would seem that it boils down to a person's question that they're asking as it relates to nutrition. If it's just like, if your goal or your why is losing weight, if your goal or your why is preventing disease or reversing, then it seems very clear as it relates to what course one needs to take. So, question back to you again, and you've mentioned this, but just to really put it out there strongly, can tell us the role and the impact of making a nutritional change on slowing or reversing or halting the progression of kidney disease. If one of the listeners out there has been told that by their doc, I have kidney disease, right? Then what can they do in order to really stem the tide in a tangible way right now?
So first is, my philosophy has always been to underpromise and overdeliver. And I do this to my patients intentionally because I don't want them to get a false sense of security. So I have to tell them that everything we're going to do with you is designed to slow down this disease. There is a chance that we may even make it better. But I'm not going to kid you. There is a chance that you may still end up on dialysis despite doing everything. But if you follow what I have to say, even if you end up on dialysis, you're going to live a much healthier life. The 5-year risk of dying on dialysis is 50%. 5-year mortality is 50%. Half the people are dead after 5 years of being on dialysis. And you can always tell which one of those 5 are because of what are the comorbidities they have. So when we get people and we have them with kidney disease, what we see time after time, patient after patient, is we're able to slow down that graph that's showing the decline going on. It slows it down, it flattens it. In some people, we start to regain that function because whatever was just the inflammatory portion, we get rid of it. If there's scarring, I can't get it back. If I chop your finger off, I can't get it back.
Mhm.
So even if there's scarring, I'm going to keep you at the same place. The power of food is so incredible that, I I used to say food is medicine, and I should still say that. I say food is culture for a different reason. But really, food is a prescription. And as you shift away from these highly processed, highly fat laden foods that are rich with these carbohydrates that create these addictions, it's a really sad tale, but I'll tell you, they do animal studies with mice, and they basically change their chow and they start giving them essentially food that's laden with sugar and fat. And then these mice start eating, so they start to gain weight. Some of them don't gain weight, but then what they do is they start to shock them every time they try to go for the food. So you would think that if I shock you every time you go for the food, you're not going to go. But guess what? The mice keep going. And
Yeah.
if they change the food to healthy food, the mice stop eating and they let themselves starve, almost to the
Mm.
point. But humans do exactly the same thing. Our addictions are so great that we keep making
Wow.
excuses to go buy this food. We're like mice. We're no different in that regards. And that's why the question you asked is, what is the power of food? It is incredible.
Yes. Wow. Wow.
Um,
Love it.
so we've gotten a lot of questions and a lot of chatter. One of the consistent things that we're seeing in the chat is that the information is amazing and is very informative. So thank you so much for that. As you're talking about kind of the addiction piece of it, there was a question as to why is it that after meals people want sugary foods? Is it a craving?
So the the answer is people don't want sugary foods. Who says people want sugary foods after meals? The
People?
people the reason, well, right. The reason people say that is because the environment that we create. Do you think a child is born with those ideas that after every meal they're going to have sugary food? You can look at breast milk,
Mm.
right? Breast milk is not laden with sugar. It actually has a lot of fat in it. It has some carbohydrates in it.
Mhm.
We teach children to crave sugars at such a young age. We
Mhm.
teach them those reward pathways, and then they've been reinforced. How long does it take to make a habit? On average, not 14 days, on average, 66 days. Anywhere between 14 days to 255 days is what the data shows.
Right.
We teach people. So if we teach people to do wrong, we can teach people to do right. So if the question is why do we crave it? It's because we built that habit. Why don't we unhabit ourselves?
Mm.
Right.
Very good.
Love it. Love it.
So one of the other questions is that the corset has come back in style these days as women are attempting to get smaller waists. Does the corset negatively impact the kidneys as organs shift?
You know, it's a great question. What I would say to that is for any time that you start to squeeze and you start to decrease the blood flow, you know, if you look at renal veins, and I don't have anything that I could show you that would be similar to your renal vein and your renal artery, but they are so soft. It takes such little pressure to go ahead and reduce them. So that's why when we talk about men with big bellies, that fat is putting mechanical pressure and constantly reducing the blood supplies going to your kidneys. We have something called abdominal compartment syndrome, right? Which is basically pressure, and that pressure causes kidney failure because of the fact that just that pressure alone is enough to shut off the blood supply. So I have no data on trying to slim the waist or anything like that. What I would say is the analogy is anything that tries to put pressure in that middle
In the
area,
area?
risk that it could also put pressure on those very friable veins and arteries that just takes a little bit to reduce the blood supply to your kidneys.
Okay. And the next question is, how does kidney disease cause anemia?
Great question. So kidneys produce a hormone called erythropoietin. Now, if you remember Tour de France, there were a number of athletes who were injecting themselves with erythropoietin. Erythropoietin basically tells your bones to make more blood. Blood carries oxygen. So when you get kidney disease, and if that portion of the kidney that makes erythropoietin is affected, it's like you don't have any commander-in-chief telling the armies to do anything. So the bones, they can make blood, but nobody's telling them, so why should they make it? So they just sit around and do nothing.
Okay. Does increasing your water intake improve your kidney function?
No. So this is like the biggest myth of all time. In fact, there was a statement, and I can't remember the exact date, so forgive me on this, but they basically said, you know, it was something around you got to drink 8 glasses of 8 ounces each daily, right? There was a statement. What's funny about that statement, I actually read that paper, and the second line of that paper said, the majority of that water comes from food, right? So in other words, the 8 ounces, 8 glasses is a myth. How much water do you need to drink? It turns out if you're thirsty, drink. If you're older, your thirst mechanism goes essentially awry, and it's hard for you to tell when you need to drink. So those are the people that want to be careful. Generally speaking, you should drink for several reasons. One is if you have kidney stones, it's the best way to prevent kidney stones. So for kidney stone patients, we tell them drink 3 liters of water a day. If you're somebody who has urinary tract infections a lot, for women, this happens more than men simply because of the anatomy. Drinking water helps because you want to wash it out. Bacteria grows in a pond. Bacteria does not grow in a stream, right? It latch on.
Right.
Keep it moving. So it's not enough to drink water. You got to pee regularly too. Drink water regularly. Don't hold your pee.
Right. Okay.
There's an entire show on, they were giving away a Nintendo Wii, and it was basically hold your Wii to win a Wii. And but unfortunately, the person on the show, she died.
Oh no!
Oh,
really?
wow.
Oh,
I mean, did she win though? No, just kidding.
She
Okay.
won, and she went home. She had a mild headache, and she died. And the reason
that is terrible.
was because she drank so much water, and she did not pee. So that diluted her salt level. Low salt, just like high salt, will cause coma, seizures, and death.
Yeah, let me jump in here. People always ask me about water, and I tell you I say the same thing. There's so much water in fruit and vegetables that if you eat plants, it's actually the best water you're ever going to get. And I can't just drink a lot of water. If I work out and I sweat, I guzzle water. But otherwise not, I can't. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm gonna make sure my wife.
But if you're not eating those fruity vegetables, and go ahead, Columbus.
Yeah, I think there is a balance. So, I mean, you know, I think that we have to be careful with many people who are eating a highly refined processed dietary intake that's going to have massive amounts of sodium. Some estimates are the average American roughly 10,000 milligrams of sodium per day. And so when you're having that and then they're ingesting caffeinated beverages on top that, not to step on Dr. Hashmi's toes, may cause them to lose free water, and they're not replacing it, it may lead to issues that arise for those who are seeking weight loss. Obviously, that replacement, there's some small studies, and I know that they've been back and forth, may show a heightened sense of metabolism too as well, that some may actually lose weight despite an isocaloric amount of intake that's there. So I think the key thing is having awareness and your overall picture, like Dr. Hashmi mentions in the self principle, and it's looking not just at the complete type of foods, and really recognizing the importance and what are you putting into your body from a liquid standpoint. I'd be willing to bet Dr. Hashmi's coffee is probably black coffee with a little whatever. It's probably not
No
like layers of sugar and cream and everything else on top of it. I'm almost certain that's not the case.
It's always plain decaf, and then there's soy milk, unsweetened. That's it. Every time.
Well, I just say that because that's good for people. I think people need to know that their diet is a part of where they get water from.
Yes.
So what our society is telling people, clearly they want people, it's almost like they want people eating the standard American diet, and almost as if, well, if you just drink enough water, you'll make it all better. And so for me, the best water you can get is actually in food, and it's in plant food, obviously.
Now, flipping that around to what Dr. Batiste is talking about is that most Americans, because unfortunately they follow the SAD diet, the standard American diet, they're always dehydrated. So this statement that I'm talking about does not apply to them because of the fact that they walk around in this chronically dehydrated state. If they drank water, they would feel so much better. In fact, when you wake up in the morning, if you drink a small glass of water, instantly you will feel so refreshed. Hydration makes you feel refreshed. Just don't go putting like all sorts of stuff in there. Drink water, right? It's the best stuff on earth. Not
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Okay, so I would like to find out from each of you guys, based on the self principle that the doctor shared with us, what is your favorite self principle, if you had to pick? And let's review what those are again, and then I would like for you guys to pick which one would be your favorite.
So sleep, exercise, love, and food.
Okay, and your favorite is, because you're a Scorpio, I'm going to say love.
So mine is actually love.
There we go. I knew it.
I value love, and I value my relationships more so than anything. I value relationships, and I listen. I tell you, I've seen so many of my people that I care about. I've lost a lot of people that I loved, and what I realized was all of those moments you have to cherish. You have to, because life at the end of the day is not about all those blings that you have. But every time you change, every time you give somebody something, a piece of yourself, you grow.
Yes.
I get more back from my work than I think the benefit goes to anybody. I just feel like it fills my soul, and that's the most important
Amen.
thing.
Yes, I already knew that about you. I just did. So, okay, Columbus, what would be your favorite principle, self principle?
Oh, besides loving my wife, I would probably have to throw a close second to that, because I don't want to take Dr. Hashmi's love too as well. I would probably say exercise. It gives me a high. I feel better about myself. It gives me a sense of energy. When I feel my muscles tighten or a little sore, you might say as I get a little older, it's like I feel rejuvenated, especially when I engage in green exercise. When I do it outdoors and get that double dosing of the sunlight mixed in with the activity and breathing fresh air after a good rainfall.
In California.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Eric, you're asking what are the favorite self principles, and what would be yours?
I believe in the Gestalt. I think the entire package put together is really what I like. I've never heard it put together the way Dr. Hashmi puts it together. And when I think about it, all of it really does play together. The scripture says that you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so exercise, food, and sleep is you taking care of yourself so that you can actually practice the love principle, so that you can do for others. And I agree with you, Dr. Hashmi. I think nothing makes me feel better than the fact that I'm able to help and do for others, marginalized people. I had a patient one day who, had just not been listened to. He looked homeless, came into one of our urgent cares, and he had been to like 5 places. And I took him in, he smelled, and we took such good care of this guy, literally saved his life. He came back and thanked us. And I mean, the whole staff was in tears, because to look at him, you would think, well, get this guy out of here. Like, he's going to scare all our other patients away. So all of it works together. And I think I like the concept of synergy. And I think the self principles, when they work together, are synergistic.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I know we had talked about like the kidney disease is kind of a silent killer, but the question is, how would you know if you have kidney disease? Are there any level of symptoms that a person could, hone in on?
No, the symptoms, unfortunately, they come at a much later stage. So what I would recommend is always, if you go see your doctor, it's a very simple blood test. They just check your creatinine in the blood. They can find out. It's one single stick and it's done. But waiting for symptoms is a mistake. And if you have anything like diabetes, if you have anything like kidney disease, if you have high blood pressure, if you're African American, ask your doctor, do I have any protein in the urine? What is my stage of kidney disease? A lot of doctors, what happens is they're like, yeah, the person is stage 3, not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal, because at stage 3, I can stop it.
Wow.
So you want to make yourself intelligent and know and realize that the risk of dialysis compared to Caucasians is 4 times higher.
Wow.
And the causes are diabetes, blood pressure, obesity.
Right.
So protein in the urine.
Right.
If you find that your kidney function is not where it ought to be, meaning more than 60, right, do something.
Yeah.
The most important thing is do something.
Yeah. And as a woman, when I go to the doctor, the only time that they really ask about, checking your urine is if they think you're pregnant. Like, that's not a standard thing to ask about. So, is that something that people should be asking? Please, run my urine, as like in terms of beyond just getting a checkup.
So even if they start with just a simple blood test, it will still answer your question. One of the signs of kidney disease is if your urine is very bubbly, like a bubble bath, not a little bit foamy, because everybody's urine is a little foamy. It's like a bubble bath. So if you see it's very foamy, that's a sign of spilling protein, and that's something you want to get checked out. And oftentimes, I get patients and they say, oh yeah, my urine is very foamy, I'll check it out, and they're fine. But where I've trained them to make sure when their disease is occurring, they call me up and they say, yeah, Dr. Hashmi, my urine is very foamy. I tell them that's because we have to check your protein. The disease may be getting worse.
Now, you talked about the foamy urine, but I know a lot of times we say if your urine is not clear, it should be a certain color. So what is like like you have a bright, orange or bright colored urine, and they say you should drink water till your urine is clear. Is that accurate?
Urine comes in many different colors. There's purple urine, there's yellow urine, there's orange urine, there's red urine. But generally speaking, right, you want it to be light yellow. Light yellow is a sign that you're well hydrated. You don't need to make it clear. Now, I'll tell you, kidney doctors get a bad rap because back in the day, before I was born, the way we found out if somebody had diabetes was we had to sample the urine. Thank goodness we're over the dark ages.
They actually have to taste the urine. Is what
that's good. That's good. So we don't have to worry about what's in your cup. Then is that what you're saying?
Well, you know what they do. You know, at the University of the West Indies Hospital in Jamaica, they throw the urine. They I don't know. I'm sure they still do this. But they throw the urine on the ground, and if the ants came to get the urine, then that's how they knew they were diabetic.
Well, that's better than the other.
Yes. Well, two things I want you to touch on too as well. And this is actually interesting because I had a patient who asked me this question just today, and really because when you went through the stages of kidney disease, you said just that. So stage 1, is there ever, and this, let's assume I don't know because I'm coming to a specialist. Is there ever someone not in a stage of kidney disease? Are they so normal that they would never be listed as kidney disease stage 1?
So basically, to classify as stage 1 or 2, if you're stage 1 or 2 but have no protein in the urine, that means you're completely normal. We won't call you stage 1 or 2. The only reason we call you stage 1 or 2 is if you actually have protein in the urine. So in other words, stage 1 is really 90 and above. But 90 and above, you're normal. But if you have protein in the urine, then you're classified as stage 1. Stage 2 is 60 to 90. Once again, if you don't have protein in the urine, that's completely normal. You're fine. So if you're above 60, you are fine. But if you have protein in the urine, we classify that as kidney disease. It just means that there's still enough nephrons fighting, that they haven't gotten to the point where the kidney function has declined enough.
Somebody's going to want to ask the question, going back to food, somebody's going to want to ask that question, what foods do you eat to protect your kidney? So we talked about what foods, soda, alcohol. Right. Are there foods you can eat besides just the generic kind of plant-based diet? Are there any specific foods that help with the kidneys?
Yeah, so when it comes to protein, the best protein for kidneys is tofu. When it comes to vegetables, right, it's the standard sort of answers where you look at your green leafy vegetables are fantastic for you. People are always concerned about potassium. We check a blood test and we tailor your diet based on potassium. So if your potassium is high, we'll tell you, hey, cut down on those beets that you're eating every single day. Or, you're having 2 bananas a day. Let's try 1 banana a day. But people assume a high potassium or kidney disease is saying I can't have any fresh fruits or vegetables. That's a misnomer. Not only that, in my practice, what I end up doing is, because I use people shifting away from the SAD diet to the plant-based diet, I use potassium binders so that they can continue to have whole fruits and vegetables to be able to do that. There's a reason.
Wonderful.
If you talk about it, fruits and vegetables are awesome. The color matters in the sense that the darker the color, the more antioxidants there are. Right. And the more you go for the rainbow, the better off you're going to be. Rainbow is awesome. Now, I had a pleasure of having a chef, Dr. Linda Shu, on my show. And what was fascinating was her philosophy is color. Just aim for the rainbow. And she's not the first person. I've heard so many people say this. So I love that concept is, we want to know the secret ingredient to the secret ingredient soup. Tell you the secret. There is no secret. That's the secret.
Come on now, Shifu. No, that's excellent. That's excellent. That's very excellent. And I mean, we could literally talk to you all night about this, because I think this is such a powerful segment. I mean, I mentioned already, I really think a lot of people feel handcuffed. They feel as if this is their destiny. And, we say this all the time, that your DNA is not your destiny. And so it's such a joy hearing another professional mention the fact that it is not your destiny. And this includes kidney dysfunction, kidney disease, and there's power in lifestyle, power in the self principle, that is, and being connected.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. I mean, it reminded me of a lot of things. I had a great nephrologist as an attending when I was in medical school at University of Miami, and he was from Argentina. And you're the only other person that is as eloquent. I mean, at describing the kidney and its function. He really made me fall in love with the kidney way back then, and I think you've really reignited my love for the kidney. I think I'm gonna actually go and do some research and some studies on this, because I think it's an organ that is often forgotten about until, like you said, until it's too late. And for African, I'll say this and I won't say anything else. But I remember when my grandmother called me. I was still at Loma Linda working as an attending and medical director there, and she called me to tell me they told her she needed to go on dialysis. And I said, okay, Mama, you got to go on dialysis. It's going to be tough, but you can go 3 times a week. She refused to go. And I will never forget being in my back. And at the time I had this big backyard and all this, and I wept bitterly by myself in that backyard, because I knew what it meant. My grandmother was tough. She lived another 2.5 years and never went on dialysis, but obviously, her condition really can deteriorate. And, it didn't have to be that way. It really didn't have to be that way. So, hearing what you're saying and wanting to pass this forward to help other people, especially to not have that kind of an experience, I think is really important.
Yeah. So let's do a round robin closing remarks. Dr. Hashmi, do you want to leave the audience with anything? You left us with so many pearls.
So many. I got pages of stuff written here. I took notes. I got like 4 pages of notes. This was awesome.
Yeah. See, I have the pleasure of stalking him through his video lectures he gives to the group at large. So I have access to him. But leave our audience with any lasting pearls that you may have as we sign off on today's show.
The only thing I'll say is just realize that hope is the most powerful thing in the world. There's nothing else that comes close to hope. You know, people talk about placebo effects as something that's bad, right? So we do randomized controlled trials.
Mm,
Placebo effect is there. But what does the placebo effect say? It says
Yes.
if you believe in something, that in itself can have results as much as 30%. You
Yes.
can change 30% of the outcome simply by believing. So placebo effect is not a bad thing. It's this untapped thing that we have that's the power of human spirit. So everything we talked about with kidney disease or heart disease or cancer, wherever you are in life, listen, I had measles as a child. I was supposed to be dead. I was bedridden for a month, and
mm.
the only thing I drank was milk and 7-Up. It sounds gross, but that's literally the only thing I drank because that's the only thing I could tolerate. I've had food issues my entire life. I've had health issues my entire life. And here I am, successful, standing tall, making a difference in the world. That's hope. Hope is powerful. Don't forget that.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. 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 Eric, close us
All right.
out.
I want to start by just thanking Dr. Hashmi for his wisdom, insight, and we'll be able to, this will be online. People will watch this. This will actually literally help save people's lives
Yes.
because this is not something they hear in a typical doctor's visit in the United States, quite frankly. And coming from someone as esteemed as you are, to support a whole food plant-based lifestyle is really, really powerful. And the fact that you really understand the plight of much of, and that's the Black America. I mean, where you lived and the schools you went to and the things you saw, I think you understand what it's like to live in the segregated existence that is America. So all of that I take into consideration. I will say that I'm inspired by what you said as well. I think looking at gratitude and love as a direct health benefiter is a powerful, powerful thing. So I just want to say I appreciate you. You've literally been one of my favorite guests we've had on, and really changed the way I see things. And I will make sure much of my family gets on and watches this episode because this was just very valuable.
Yes, yes, yes. I echo all those sentiments. It's a pleasure. I knew you would be phenomenal joining us here today, and I hope it's not the last time. Hope we have you back
Yes,
for part
definitely.
2 at some point in the future. But for those of you who watch, I do want to encourage you to subscribe to us on YouTube, like our Slave Food page on Facebook, send this out to someone you know who can benefit from it.
Yes.
All right. Be an agent of change and do that is the one task I'll ask you. And so next week, we want to see the numbers increase based upon it. Next week, we're actually going to be coming in on the first and the third weekend, Friday of every month is what we're looking to. Our next show that is coming up, we're planning on having a doctor of nutrition, Dr. Ruby Lathan, who is featured in What the Health. And so we look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks. But we want to once again shower our gratitude on Dr. Hashmi for joining us here again
Absolutely.
today. And we thank him, appreciate him. And next time, Slave Food family, we'll see you back here. Thank you all.